Yorkshire coast, mischievous hobs and boggles also inhabited sea caves, and some could help heal sick children. The whole region abounds in folklore, from the fairy queen of the Yorkshire Dales, who dwells in a cave behind Janet's Foss, Waterfall, to an altogether more malevolent fairy, Jeanie of Biggersdale, of Mulgrave Woods in North Yorkshire moors. A cave in the side of Elbolton Hill in the Yorkshire Dales is reputed to be a portal to the land of Fairy, and fairies are said to inhabit the forest of Bowland in Lancashire. Pendle Hill and the surrounding Lancashire villages will forever be associated with witchcraft, owing to the infamous witch trials of the 17th century. While the Pendle witches were accused of being malevolent, Mother Shipton of Knaresborough foretold the future and warned of danger to come. You can visit the cave where she lived, alongside the famous dropping well where objects left hanging seemed to be turned to stone. Okay, so let's have a look at some different places, and we'll start with Lancashire. Here we have fairy holes in the forest of Bowland. In the woods above the River Hodder, near Whitewell, the limestone caves are known as the fairy holes, and only one is large enough to enter without crawling. A Clitheroe midwife was reputedly brought to the caves to attend a fairy birth, and when the father told her to use a special ointment, she stole a small amount for herself. Following the successful birth, she was paid handsomely in fairy gold and returned home. After smearing the ointment on her eye, she had the power to see the fairies, and one market day she noticed the fairy father stealing apples from a stall. When she reproached him, the fairy demanded to know which eye she had seen him with, and touched it. The spell was instantly broken, and the midwife never saw the fairies again. Whitewell is located in the forest of Bowland, a rural farming area with clusters of tiny stone-built settlements overlooked by windswept fells and wooded valleys, called cloughs, with tumbling rivers and streams. Many fairy traditions are associated with the area, including a Dinkling Green near Whitewell, where fairies were seen dancing on the white stone, only to disappear down holes in the ground. And next we have Becky's Well in Clitheroe. And that's this picture. Situated in the grounds of Boggle Hole on the northern Some said that the restless spirit of the victim manifested as a boggart and caused several members of the family to die in mysterious circumstances. Yet even after the stone was laid, strange happenings continued, and locals said the slab was cursed. Years later, a new tenant farmer decided the stone would be useful in his dairy. Using a whole team of horses, he finally removed the stone, but a strange sound emanated from inside it. That night, the farmer and his family were subjected to a terrifying supernatural attack, and he decided to return the stone, although curiously, only one horse was needed to move it back. In another incident, a doctor was knocked from his horse and nearly squeezed to death by a shapeless mass that had materialized from the stone. And there it is. So now let's go to West Yorkshire. And this picture is Cottingley Beck. While Britain was dealing with the trauma of World War I, two young girls brought some welcome magic by publishing photos of fairies they'd seen playing in the woods around Cottingley Beck, not far from their home. The photographs caused a sensation, and experts from Kodak couldn't see how they had been faked, especially by two youngsters, and declared them genuine. Controversy, however, dogged the story, and the two photographers, now elderly women, admitted they'd faked them, using drawings stuck on hat pins. However, Frances Griffiths, the younger of the two, maintained until the end of her life that the fifth and final photo, taken in 1920, was not a fake. In this image, titled Fairies and Their Son Beth, ethereal fairy women are seen in a nest-like enclosure of grasses and flowers. In addition to fairies and wood elves, the girls also saw little men dressed in green around the waterfall at the Beck. Cottingley Beck now flows behind a modern housing estate to the south of the village, and this little patch of wilderness amid the development can only be reached by scrambling down beside a bridge that provides access to the estate. In recognition of the story, some of the estate's roads were named after the fairies in Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. The original photographic prints and camera used by the girls are on display in Bradford's National Science and Media Museum. is Elbolton Hill in Thrushfield. Near the summit of Elbolton Hill is a near vertical shaft known as Navy Noodle Hole that leads down to deep underground caverns. It is said to be an entrance to the land of Fairy, whose inhabitants have been seen dancing at night on the grassy flanks of the hill. One accessible from the beach only at low tide, and once provided a convenient place for smugglers to stash their loot. Nearby, the Boggle Hole Youth Hostel has pictures and information boards about the Boggle and its legendary cave. Okay, so number 19 is this picture here, and also here. Ferry Cross Plain, Fryupdale in Danby, North Yorkshire moors. Bounded by the River Esk to the north and the high moors to the south, the twin valleys of Great Fryupdale and Little Fryupdale are separated by a long ridge known as Danby Heads. At the southern tip of Danby Heads, where the two valleys merge, is a place steeped in legend, Ferry Cross Plain, where the little folk would emerge from their underground tunnels to dance, and where fairy rings were a common sight. These circles of wild fungi expand outwards over time, creating a dark ring of grass and also a ring of toadstools. Once the fruiting bodies emerge, running around a fairy ring 9 times in the light of the full moon would enable you to hear the fairies laughing and dancing in the halls below, but local children in Fryupdale were strongly advised against this, or the fairies would gain power over them or even whisk them away to fairyland. Local people tended to avoid the rings altogether, and it was even said that sheep and cattle would not graze near them. Sometimes people saw the fairies dressed in green and wearing a strange cap, disappearing into the earth of the plain. One woman even found a fairy baby hidden in some hay, but separated from its fairy family. It soon sickened and died. At night, people reported hearing the sound of fairies making their fairy butter, which they would enjoy flinging at houses and farm buildings. Households around the Butterbeck, near Egton Grange in the east, were frequently targeted and woke to find the butter, a type of fungus that grows overnight, stuck on fence posts and other wooden structures. Ferry Cross Plain is located in an area of green pastures, bounded by dry stone walls. In the centre, where the two dales meet, a small rounded hill, sometimes known as Ferry Hill, lies halfway between the uplands of Danby Heads and Danby Rig. The latter is crossed by an ancient path known as the Old Hellway, that was used to transport corpses over Danby Rig for burial in the churchyard at Danby. People report sensing the spirits of the dead on this old corpse road. The neighbouring valley of Claysdale to the east is also the site of magical occurrences. The first concerns the hob of Hod Hall, a little fellow, covered in shaggy hair and wearing nothing more than a threadbare tunic, who helped out around the farm at night. When some boys spied on him and, taking pity, made him a new tunic, the hob was insulted and left, never to return. In the second story, a hare was seen by a local farmer nibbling his saplings. Realising it was a witch in disguise, he loaded his gun with silver pellets, then shot and wounded the hare, which took refuge in the cottage of a witch. Awed Maggie, she was found the next day with unexplained wounds. The slopes at the head of Claysdale became known as Witch Hill, but can be viewed from the open access